My wife is on a 72-hour lockup in a mental hospital but is genuinely not crazy. The doctors could hold her indefinitely. What do I do? I hope this doesn't get buried. I was here before in this exact same situation. The 72-hour lockup is very standard to make sure nothing happens in case the patient actually is crazy. During those 72 hours you end up speaking to a lot of rehab workers and a psychologist is assigned to you to assess how normal they think you are. If they think you're okay, they'll let you out in the 72 hours. Your wife is definitely not getting out before those 72 hours. If she is as mentally healthy as you insist, then she will be released as soon as her time is up, as the psychologist will find no reason to keep her in the hospital. They are trying to force her to take drugs that are used to treat bipolars, and she's not bipolar. She's had the drug before and had a horrible reaction to it. They don't care. Why had she previously taken the drug before this? There's background here that's been carefully not mentioned. I've been a guest of the psych ward a few times myself, twice within the same month about 2 years ago. Based on my experience, I can tell you that the hospital has no interest in keeping your wife indefinitely. Hospitals are like restaurants. There is limited seating and the faster they can get people in and out, the more money they make. When her 3 days are up, they'll release her to you. In the next couple days, just do whatever you can to make your visits with her as pleasant as possible. Bring fresh fruit or milkshakes, whatever you think she can keep down. Bring her lip gloss. And when you bring her home, know that she's going to need time to recover from this experience. Since the major players are citing the law, I think you need to find out what the law says. I worked in a psych. I'm familiar with the different conditions that can have a patient admitted, and the laws regarding their stay. Your wife took an overdose of Valium. You understand her reasoning, but you also have to realize that anything that might have been a suicide attempt requires at least an overnight stay. If the hospital acknowledges the risk and doesn't respond, the negligent malpractice that follows is huge. That said, the 72-hour stay is very likely not a mandatory 72 hours. It's much more probable that it's an extended observational bed, EOB, which allows a psych unit to hold a patient for up to 72 hours without admitting them. This is very commonly used for overdose patients, because most can be reassessed the following morning to truly determine if there is a psychiatric component or continued suicidality. If your wife was, in fact, involuntarily admitted, the paperwork that is readily available to you includes instructions for writing a discharge request. Ask for it. Once written, they have 24 hours, might be different by state, to evaluate and either discharge or set up a court hearing. Unless your wife is genuinely mentally ill, she'll be discharged. But like I said, a full admission for a patient who denies suicidal attempts or ideation, with no past psych history, is very unlikely. A lawyer, in my opinion, is completely unnecessary. Almost every overdose will be placed on a temporary mental health hold, and almost none of them will stay even the full 72 hours. It's just the busy ED doctor making sure she stays put long enough so that a real, genuine psychiatrist can talk to her, at which point she'll be coming home unless she is an immediate danger to herself. Just curious, why are you so sure she is not mentally ill? You say she isn't, but has she actually been visiting mental health professionals for this issue she has been having? Physical symptoms don't always have physical causes. Also, a psychiatrist told you he was just a nurse? That seems wrong. A nurse has an entirely different set of credentials to that of a psychiatrist, and I cannot imagine why a psychiatrist, a man with a medical degree and every right to be called a doctor, would say he was just a nurse. I can't even imagine a nurse saying just a nurse. Something tells me you're not giving us the whole story. You said your wife has previously been on medication that is used to treat bipolar disorder. A lot of mood stabilizers are also used to treat epilepsy, so I understand that that could be the reason why she had previously taken it. But still, you didn't really explain that situation, so there's still the possibility that she has a psychiatric illness which was ring treated. You also mentioned she sees a psychiatrist. Why do that, if not for mental illness? Psychiatrists are not run-of-the-mill counselors to talk through your day-to-day life with. Apart from that, calling these people she is currently housed with loonies or nutcases is horribly offensive. There's so much stigma attached to mental illness and it's disgusting. Calling these people she is currently housed with loonies or nutcases is horribly offensive. There's so much stigma attached to mental illness and it's disgusting. Jesus Christ. Thank you. I was scrolling down waiting for a voice of reason to kick in, and I'm appalled it took me this far to find one. The language being used in this thread is absolutely foul. My husband spent 5 days voluntarily in a mental facility like 6 months ago. I agree with others. She may be very distraught, but she will be safe there. It's not like places you see in movies. I was able to visit my husband once there and he was definitely super upset and irritated. As long as she isn't suicidal, they won't keep her. Make sure she stays up at her doc appointments when she gets home. Go to their appointments with her. Psych doc here. The 72,302 or 5,150 involuntary commitment hold is for observation. Most likely if she is of sane mind and cooperating she will be home and you can continue treatment after the 72 hours are up. Most the time on holds like this you are just on a floor with a few other patients pretty much in a school detention environment. 3 meals a day, a few deck of cards, board games, and some therapists to talk to you periodically. It's really not that bad. Get your butt over to the hospital to get started on the paperwork and a diagnosis. Bring evidence if you have it of her pre-existing condition. Explain to the CMD that she hasn't slept and it's causing anxiety blah blah. Stay calm while you do this. About the 72-hour hold. Because she was on Valium, a highly controlled class 3 narcotic, and a little loopy they have to hold her strictly because of protocol. It's not because she's suicidal but because they have to make sure she isn't self-medicating and messing everything up, on purpose or by accident. This way it gives her enough time to clear her system of toxins and medications while they observe her behavior. I recommend just taking it easy and not worry about it. She's in the best place she can be if she is sick. They will also observe her ability to not sleep and other medical conditions that arise. So this is a plus for your case and her diagnosis. Also, it's lupus. Take care. Everything will work out fine as long as you stay calm and rational. PM if you have questions. You wait until the 72 hours are up. You can't do crap. I'm sorry. This is actually probably one of the most realistic pieces of advice. There really isn't much you can do legally in such a short amount of time. This whole story is sketchy. You're leaving out a crap ton of details or something. Why was she on bipolar medicine before? Why does she think a nurse is a psychiatrist? Was she Baker acted? Happened to a friend of mine a few years back. Guy was bad off on the sauce one night and called his fiancée and threatened to kill himself. She called the cops. They broke down his door when he wouldn't answer, and they Baker acted him. He had to stay until he could be evaluated by the hospital psychiatrist. Believe it or not, mental institutions, especially state-run ones, aren't that dangerous. Even people that get carted over from jail because of mental disorders typically are on their best behavior so they don't have to go back to jail. I know this sucks. It sucked when my friend went in and we were trying to figure out who to call and what to do. But, in the end, he came out, got on treatment, and ended up in a better place. Doesn't sound like your wife needs to be there, but then again, maybe she does. You don't really know what she said to the doctor and the nurse. In her confused, Valium-induced state, it's like talking about bombs on an airplane. You don't talk, or even joke, about suicide at hospitals, because there's too much liability if they don't act. Wait it out, mate. I'm sure it'll be fine. Most mental hospitals require a patient to sign a 72-hour notice before being discharged so they can fully assess them before letting them go. I'm not trying to sound like a dong, but taking into consideration that she has a regular psychiatrist and was previously treated with bipolar medication, overdosing on Valium is a huge red flag. But, aside from that, as much as I am aware, there are only 2 ways to be put in a mental hospital, and that is by signing a 201 or by being 302'd. Since you didn't mention anything about a police officer, I am assuming she signed a 201, which means she voluntarily committed herself to a psych hospital. Not true. You can be involuntarily admitted if the medical staff suspects imminent harm to self or others, but the burden of validating that it's necessary is on them and it gets more and more strenuous to prove necessity as time goes on. Suspects imminent harm, not supports imminent harm. First off, a 72-hour hold, or a 5,150, can be dropped at any time the patient is assessed as stable clinically. However, before I can say anything else, you are obviously leaving a lot of information out. No one is going to put a patient on a 72-hour hold or keep them on one because they've taken an insignificant overdose. It's a ridiculous amount of extra work. So, what is the scoop? I'm a therapist who has worked at a psychiatric facility. Most patients are not crazy, but have serious mental illness that necessitates some form of treatment. Calling these facilities loony bins is pretty degrading to the patients and staff. Other patients, however, are in situations similar to your wife's. They believe their being admitted was a mistake. While they might not need prolonged psychiatric care, at one point they were in a place where they were at risk of self-harm or neglect. Premeditated or not, it seems unfair, but I imagine you can appreciate the fact that the medical personnel are trying to keep people safe, and sometimes that means a temporary psychiatric hospital admission. Many, perhaps most, psychiatrists, nurses, and therapists at these places are well-intentioned individuals who sometimes have to put people in uncomfortable situations in order to obey the law and do their job correctly. Patients are not required to take meds, and they are not penalized for not taking them. However, if the psychiatrist has evaluated your wife and determined she would benefit from psychotropic medication, there is a chance she could benefit. The doctors aim to help patients become as mentally stable as possible, and sometimes that means recommending medication. One thing that's unfortunate is it seems that psychiatrists don't care about patients, because they don't spend much time with them. But every day for years and years these individuals have been trained in how to make accurate assessments in a short amount of time. It's true they can't learn everything about your wife in 10 minutes, but they're very skilled at assessing and diagnosing. Additionally, your wife will likely meet with an evaluator, nurses, and therapists who will get her side of the story, allowing everyone involved to have a pretty full picture. When I worked at the hospital, I would spend a couple hours with most clients, and many of the other therapists would do the same. You're definitely going through what so many families go through. I empathize with the fear and stress you're experiencing. I can imagine waiting to have your wife back is incredibly difficult. I imagine that way your wife is, despite being scary, actually really safe. The patients are never given items like chemicals and brushes before they are checked over, but my guess is it won't be long until she's given back her belongings. Where I worked, it took a bit for nurses to do inventory of all items brought in, but this is to ensure patient safety and ensure people get their things back when they leave. It doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary is happening. I know it's hard to see things from the hospital's point of view, but I encourage you to try to see how this place is not evil and can actually be beneficial. I hope your wife gets out soon, and I hope, in the meantime, you both hang in there as best you can. Take care. Ianal, but I am a doctor. Let's review. Your wife has been vomiting for months, has a psychiatrist, is on psychiatric meds, has been admitted involuntarily to a psychiatric facility after an overdose of medication, and you are sure her illness is not primarily psychiatric. You may be wrong. Helping the psychiatrists evaluate and treat her would be the best way to get her home soon. Well, that was a fairly devastating summary. The OP is littered with more red flags than a minesweeper board. As her primary emergency contact, you can call the hospital and demand that she get a full battery of medical testing. You can attempt to call the State Division of Mental Health if you are in the US and they will assist you with advocating for your wife. But what is going to end up happening is that she will wait out the hold. The problem is that many suicides are accidental, and if your wife is depressed enough to mistake medications, she is a suicide risk, even if she is not intending to hurt herself. You can call the hospital and demand anything you want, but that doesn't mean you will get it. If she is already being worked up for a medical problem that has become chronic, nobody is going to do anything whatsoever regarding her digestive disorder on a psych unit. As someone who's spent time as a patient in a mental hospital, please don't call people suffering from mental illness crazy or bipolars, or call a hospital where people are receiving medical care for legitimate health issues a loony bin before complaining about your wife being treated as subhuman. Stop and think about how you are describing the other people in that ward. I'm sorry, but your story reeks of bulls, ignorance, and a clearly traumatized and not thinking straight husband. She took more than her typical dose of Valium, but nothing near a fatal dose. Says who? Says you? And what are your qualifications, both in terms of mental and physical medicine? Do you know how many Valiums it would take for your wife to be in danger? Or do you think doctors might know better? All the while, my wife was calm, polite, and respectful, though obviously frustrated at her lack of ability to sleep. She said some combination of magic words, guaranteed. Have you ever stopped to consider that this might be a good thing? Maybe your wife actually is having a mental breakdown? She was carted off to the loony bin. Having been in such a situation and knowing personally people that doing what is being done to your wife has been the one thing that saved their life. Frick you, you insensitive fricking C. All of the other patients in there are actually nuts, bulls, and a classic case of projecting. You want to pretend nothing could possibly be wrong with your wife, even though she already goes to a shrink? Nope. It's simply that everyone else in a similar situation to her is crazy, but not her. Grow up. Guess what? When I was in her same situation, you know how long I stayed in? Less than 20 hours. They are not stupid at these places. If she's not suicidal, they'll figure that out and let her go. All I'm getting from you is you are a distraught husband, possibly in denial, who's making a great deal of unsupported assertions about how crappy this hospital and situation is. Sorry, but unlike most of Reddit, I'm not in the habit of believing offhand any p-off butthole who knows how to type. You forgot one thing. The more time she spends in this place, the more she's actually losing her mind. At this point it's difficult for her to even pretend she's normal, much less be normal. He recognizes that his wife is losing her mind, yet chalks it up to being in the hospital. Dude, you can't get a psychiatric illness by osmosis. Your attitude isn't helping your wife right now. I don't know what her apparent GI illness is, but her inability to sleep even while heavily medicated doesn't make sense. If she's been put in the state hospital, they should have given her some stronger medication so she can sleep. Why has she taken medication meant for the treatment of bipolar disorder? Mood stabilizers have a few uses, like seizures, but I think that there may be a bit more to her history that could be relevant. Also, a psychiatrist is an MD, not a nurse. Weird. From what you described, it sounds as though your wife is manic. It's a cruddy situation, but you don't know what she said to the doctors. They have to act on everything. Although it's unfortunate and scary she's not in danger, most of those places are safe. If you go raising heck, you're just gonna get a reputation and upset your wife more. My advice: be supportive of her and use the care to her advantage in figuring out what's really going on. What do I do? For starters, accept that there is a possibility that she has some kind of mental problems, possibly including suicide tendencies. You are the person best suited to help her, and if you deny it, she will never be able to accept it. As someone who is very familiar with mental illness, I resent your referring to a mental health institution as a loony bin. Sorry for what your wife is going through, but there are people who have been through some pretty rough times in their lives and for the most part cannot help the way they are. So kindly frick off with the generalizations of what a mental hospital is. I've been locked up in a psych ward, attempted suicide. Most of the people in the ward were addicts, so I felt out of place. Depending on the state laws, you should be able to check out after 72 hours. A schizo was able to check herself out after 72 hours because the only way to keep her there after 72 hours was to get a court order from a judge, which was denied. In your case, I wouldn't expect the hospital to even try to keep your wife there, and if they do, a judge would probably deny their request given your input. I didn't even bother trying to get out after 72 hours because my entire family was ready to tell the judge that I shouldn't leave. In my opinion, the best course of action would be to wait it out. Always be cordial and polite. These are the people caring for your wife for the next few days, and ask about the procedure paperwork needed to get your wife checked out of the hospital. Get all of that information now so you'll be ready to go Monday morning. While she was at the a psychiatrist talked to her and was actually ready to let her go home, but he can't change the doctor's hold order because he is just a nurse. If he's just a nurse, then he wasn't a psychiatrist. It takes more than one doctor to commit a patient to a mental health facility, one of which is to be a psychiatrist. If the psychiatrist didn't think she needs to be committed, she wouldn't have been committed. She can likely be discharged once the admitting psychiatrist evaluates her and deems her safe for discharge. Of course, this happens on that doc's time and not your wife's. Obtaining a lawyer, etc. to try to stop, reverse, or otherwise legally release her is futile. They won't keep her there for any extended period of time, drum up new diagnoses, etc. as long as she reasonably cooperates. With mental health, the rule is better safe than sorry. If they let your wife go and she was suicidal, then you sue for not recognizing it. It is only 3 days, which for her will seem like a long time. However, as long as she is cooperative and not a harm to herself or others, she will be released. There may be some legal ramifications, however. In PA, if you're 302'd involuntary admission, you can never own a gun again. Look up your state laws. You've already got a lot of responses and this may be buried, and I can't read through the whole thread to see if it's already been said. Lack of sleep will cause mental illness, all on its own. That needs to be the first concern. Can she take something like Klonopin? I have to imagine, if they think she is manic, they have already given her something like that. If they haven't, then, if she is vomiting, it could be Valium addiction withdrawal. It is possible your wife has been hiding how much Valium she is taking. Maybe she is taking other things as well that you do not know about. You may not have the whole truth here. This watch may be less suicide watch and more of a med withdrawal watch. You can guarantee they had her pee in a cup already. If she is vomiting, it could be another issue, like bulimia or anorexia. Again, you may not have the whole truth here. You may be the one she is hiding all of this from. I know you don't want to hear it, but you mentioned bipolar. Demand that they run a full gamut of tests to rule out other biological illnesses before they put her on any mood stabilizers. There are a lot of disorders that can mimic bipolar symptoms, but blood tests will be inconclusive if she is already taking the mood stabilizers. If she is begging to get out, please consider she may have an addiction to something that she is hiding from you. She wants to get out because she wants to get her fix. I'm a CNA in a mental hospital, so maybe I can offer a different take that maybe you aren't hearing. While it's likely, and not unheard of, that the staff reacted rashly, you did said some things that could raise some red flags. 1. She has a prescription for Valium, or at least access to it. 2. You mentioned that she sees a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, but a medically licensed psychiatrist. I understand the need for therapy, and I'm in no way generalizing people who seek help for their problems. Doctors, however, cost much more per hour than therapists, and seeing one regularly might signal the existence of a more severe issue. 3. Referring to your last medical doctor's visit has failed. Medical staff are receiving more training these days in how to spot mental health disorders that disguise themselves as physical illnesses. I'm not referring to psychosomatic symptoms, but their radars are particularly sensitive to self-abuse and Munchausen syndrome, which is described as inflicting illness upon yourself to receive attention from doctors. Mentioning the extra dose of Valium didn't help. I would be careful about what you say in that respect, as well, as you appear very, and rightly, frustrated by your doctor's inability to help your wife. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is similar to Munchausen syndrome, except by proxy refers to one inflicting illness upon someone else in order to receive the doctor's attention. I applaud your initiative to see a specialist for your wife's gastrointestinal issues, but keep in mind that those are one of the easiest kinds to inflict and, therefore, possibly more open to suspicion. If you'd like me to elaborate, please ask, but I really don't want to freak you out more than you already are. This will be a stressful time for your wife, but the best thing for now is to wait out the 72 hours. There are unstable individuals in those places, but if she bleeds into the background and does nothing dangerous, she should be okay. The most important thing I need to tell you is to be ready. I'm not talking about legal issues or the headaches of dealing with the healthcare system, but be ready for what you might learn. As her husband, there is the possibility that you have been blind to many things. Keep in mind that her caretakers are absolutely positive you have only wanted the best for your wife and your marriage. Nursing assistants don't need to know all of this stuff, but we learn it because we want to help. I'm sure the staff there are very similar, and truly want to help if there is a problem. I would put my safety on the line to keep her safe, and they will too. They have every reason to help her. Sorry, but doctors and psychiatrists have to act if they think there is even a whiff of suicidal thoughts. She took more than the recommended dose of Valium. They can't just listen to you go it's because she was really tired and she wasn't thinking straight. No offense, but you're biased in this situation because you're her husband. You obviously don't want her to be crazy. Also, please stop offensively calling people who have to go to mental hospitals crazy and calling it a loony bin. Really rude. They have to treat it like it's serious, and I think that that's a good thing. They don't know you and they don't know your wife, so they have to act accordingly with how they would if they knew anyone had taken an overdose of pills. Today you learned, a mental problem could be causing her problems. My cousin goes to the ER once a month complaining about abdominal pain, but there is no connection to anything. Every test comes back negative, and she isn't actually sick. She needs mental help. But she won't get it because that would solve her problem and she'd rather have attention than a solved problem. She said I should just kill myself so I can get some sleep. A nurse heard it, and she was held for 72 hours. Now, I'm not saying your wife is in the same exact situation, but it's fairly likely. Today you learned, a mental problem could be causing her problems. From the original post, called a regular psychiatrist. His hands are tied by the law. I think he already knew. In California this is called a 5150 hold. Section 5150 of the Welfare and Institutions Code. Most states have something similar. I deal with these all the time and usually you just have to wait out the 72 hours. But you can try to fight it. I've seen more than one torn up, not literally, by a psychiatrist. Here in California, a licensed psychiatrist must evaluate the patient after they are put on the hold, usually the one that is on staff at the facility she was taken to. So, step 1. Contact her PMD, the doctor dealing with her stomach issues, and get him on the phone. Also, if different, the doctor that prescribed the Valium. Get that doctor to contact both the doc to find out why she was placed on a hold, and the facility's staff psychiatrist to explain what actually went down. Step 2. Lawyer up. Contact a good attorney and tell them it's an emergency. Make sure they are in the loop with the PMD and they contact the facility. You can deal with suing the doc later. At least here in CAR, there are very few situations they can forcibly keep you after 72 hours. Make sure your lawyer knows what's going on and that the facility knows that the minute the 72 hours is up, you'll be pressing criminal charges for false imprisonment and filing a civil lawsuit. Step 3. Much later on. This will all cost a little bit of money, but you and your wife didn't incite this nonsense. Hold responsible the parties that are responsible. I'm also assuming that the facility is private and will bill you, as well as whoever transported her there. You can get legal fees, medical costs and medical costs reimbursed after a civil suit, not to mention pain and suffering. Basically, if the way you presented it is actually how it went down, because remember, there are two sides to every story, then it's complete malpractice on the part of the doc. I would not wait to lawyer up though, and if one tells you he can't help you, call another. On a more personal note, don't be ignorant. I've seen too many family members get bent out of shape over this because their loved one really was suicidal and they hadn't noticed or didn't want to accept it. Just be careful that you're not blinding yourself, or that you're not the only one left out of the loop. If she really does need help, it's likely not your fault. Be supportive. Your last paragraph. Gold. They didn't want to accept it. My life to a T. 5150. 72 hours hold. After that she is free to go. Also, why was she on bipolar meds before? She must have had a history of mental illness if she was on that medicine previously. Let the doctors do their jobs. Be patient. Your wife's mental health is worth a couple of days of inconvenience. A family member was held on a 5150 almost a year ago, and it made me respect mental hospitals way more than I did prior. I can guarantee the mental hospital doesn't want to hold your wife indefinitely, but they're going to keep her under observation until one of their psychiatrists can determine that she is not a danger to herself or others. From a liability perspective, it would be irresponsible for a hospital to let someone go before the 72 hours are up. Imagine if something did happen, the hospital would be liable. Hang in there. I know how scary it can be for a loved one to be held on a 5150, but I promise you that they have your wife's best interests in mind. Yeah, Man, you're just going to have to wait this one out. Talk to a lawyer if they don't want to release her after the 3 days. Make sure you send her love in there. Good luck. Thanks. Visiting hours start in 2.5 hours. I'm going to arrive early. This happened to a friend of mine after she put her hand through a door. They said she was self-harming instead of just being pee off and punching a hollow door. The doctors even claimed she voluntarily committed herself by saying that yes, she did want to rest a while before going home. She had driven herself to the hospital to have her hand looked at, was given some severe painkillers and didn't want to drive home on them. Boom, they commit for her 72 hours. Now the laws are different in every state, but after the first 24 hours they allowed my friend to have visitors during designated times and for another friend to bring her clothes and toiletries. Find out when the soonest you can get in to see her and find out what you can take her. They usually keep you out of contact for the first 24 hours to see if it's a drug reaction. At least that's what we were told. Also get some legal advice. Seriously. She may have to wait out the 72 hours, but make sure you have an advocate on your side. While I am neither a doctor nor a lawyer, I do have some experience in this area. My mother is, genuinely, a nut job, and has been through this 72-hour lockup suicide watch thing several times. I know this is stressful, and it is a truly terrible, unfortunate situation for both you and your wife, but at this point all you can really do is wait until the 72 hours are up. They are not going to release her without a court order, and it's unlikely you'll get one in time. The good news is that they, most likely, cannot, and will not, keep her there indefinitely. The law only requires that they hold her for 72 hours. Keeping her further against her will require the court ordering it. They may want to keep her, but if she doesn't want to stay, she is fully able to walk out the door once the 3 days are up. My definitely crazy mother just walked out of a state mental facility no less than 3 months ago after yet another psychiatric hold as a result of yet another suicide attempt. I'm sorry this has happened to you, but all you can really do at this point is wait. Be there to comfort her when she is released, and be prepared to sue the pants off the doctor and nurse who originally signed for the suicide watch, unless they have evidence that she did, in her sleep-deprived, Valium-addled state, say something to cause concern. There is nothing you can do. It is precautions that hospitals must take. Doctors and nurses sign vows to handle cases in such a way if confronted with these types of matters. Extreme sleep deprivation, which is what it seems like by how you describe, can lead to psychological issues such as psychosis and mild forms of schizophrenia, until she gets proper rest. If she or you have provided proper patient history for her, you would have mentioned that the bipolar medication she's taken before have given her such reactions. You say she is throwing up and having stomach problems. Of course a hospital is going to have her initially on a NPO or liquid diet, and more so since she is a brand new patient. That is how it goes. Hospitals have many procedures they will conduct, especially if there is gestational issue. If she can't keep anything down, why would she want to eat anyways? You seem to know an awful lot about your wife's mental state. Wouldn't it perhaps be better to let the doctors observe her and determine if there might actually be something wrong? You state she has stomach problems. If there is nothing physically wrong with her, then it may be a symptom of some mental disorder or brain function issue. I wouldn't be so quick to self-diagnose what is or isn't her problem. I'd want to get as many opinions as possible. As for putting her on suicide watch, don't blame the for following a sensible policy for the circumstances. Imagine the liability and the potential loss of life if they let every overdosed patient just walk out of the hospital on the consent of a relative. I understand that your wife has been admitted and all that, but my brother's wife just got out from a 5-day observation and has never felt better. She may actually need some psychiatric assistance. I think you need to relax, my brother. Go to a barber shop, get a nice shave, a haircut, come home and take a shower, and then put on some pee. Yank one out and hit the bed. She is in good hands for the time being, and you need to be refreshed and relaxed for her when she does get out. I can't offer you much advice on getting her out. My wife has been in those places a couple of times for legit reasons, and they don't let you out until they are satisfied. Period. I wish you all the best. When she gets out, assuming you haven't checked into this already, try to find a GI doctor that knows about gastroparesis. This is what my wife has. She went nearly a month, unable to keep anything but the most bland food down. Broth, noodles, rice, etc. Vomiting 8-12 times a day. Totally exhausted, losing weight rapidly. 50 lbs in that month. Gastroparesis is a condition where the stomach doesn't empty itself of food at the proper speed. Request a stomach emptying test. In my wife's case, she was given a scrambled egg laced with a radioactive isotope. After a set amount of time, she was then given a scan to see where the food was. By the time they did the scan, it should have been well out of her stomach. It was not. The doctor put her on a pill that she has to take before meals to help the stomach do its job, and it has made a huge difference. Unfortunately, the side effects of this pill are potentially severe enough that she can't take it forever. There are some experimental procedures being tested but nothing that insurance will cover yet. So as to the future, we don't know. Not to sound insensitive, but how you described this makes me think she actually does have some mental issues, but you are too close to it, or are in denial. That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't want to sound cruel, but maybe your wife does need mental help and you don't recognize that fact because you don't want it to be true. If she does need help, that doesn't mean she's crazy, she just needs some extra help to get her along and living a happy, healthy life. Don't be upset, she'll be okay. Like others have said, there's nothing you can accomplish in the little time she has left in the hospital. They will most likely release her after the 72 hours. The absolute best thing you can do is to stop freaking out yourself and try as hard as you can to rest, so that when she gets home you can help her in any way she needs you to. Be patient, calm, and encouraging even when it's hard. She needs some sort of stability, and you can be that for her. Basically, just do everything you possibly can to make this, her being in the mental hospital, and then when she comes home, as easy and comfortable for her as you can. That's all you can do. Licensed professional counselor here. My best advice is to work with the hospital and not against. I do these types of psychiatric evaluations all the time. Depending on what state you are in, look up in your state statute, sometimes called the Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Code. This will outline what your laws are in regards to an involuntary commitment, NIL, and this may vary by state. After the 72-hour hold is up, a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, needs to sign an additional certificate in order to hold your wife longer than the initial time frame. It's possible she may be held based solely on the fact that she is not sleeping. If a human goes without 72 hours of sleep in a row, hallucinations and delusions may be experienced. You certainly do not want her to have a psychotic break. If the hospital believes that she has a strong support system at home, that is, you are around to watch her and take care of her, they are more likely to let her go. Agree to what they ask of you if she is to be released. Offer to lock up her medications and be the one to distribute them to her to prevent future overdoses. Encourage making a safety plan with their staff members. Ask what you can do to help her and keep her safe. If you work against them, they will believe you are confrontational and they could label you as unstable, which, for the record, I do not believe you nor her are unstable. This is one of those fricked up situations that should not have happened this way. Tell her to be as compliant as she can and then raise heck when you get her out of there. I'm thinking the OP just doesn't want to accept that his wife is crazy. I also don't think we are getting the full story here. I'm wondering if his wife has any previous history of accidentally taking too much medicine. You say she is not bipolar and yet she has had the medicine before and knows that she has a bad reaction to it. Signing a document to admit someone to the psych ward is a big deal. There are serious consequences to signing that document, like being held for 72 hours against your will, and doctors aren't going to make that decision lightly. I work in a hospital and trust me, doctors are very worried about being sued. I'm guessing your wife either wasn't behaving as politely as you said or she has some prior medical history that would warrant further psychiatric evaluation. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video.